The Appalachian Mountains are old, older than memory, older than history. And in their shadows, things have been waiting. Some whistle from the woods. Some crawl from sealed-off mines. Some wear the faces of your dead. And some answer when you ring the wrong bell. These are 5 true stories from deep in the Appalachians. Stories of cabins, caves, cemeteries, and things that should have stayed buried. And if you listen closely, you might hear them coming. Carter was 28 when he got the contract with the state. It was routine work. Track deer populations, identify migration patterns, update the land usage logs. The area of concern? An uninhabited tract of forest known locally as Laurel Branch Hollow. According to the locals, no one really went there. Not hunters, not campers. There were no trails marked on the maps, and that was on purpose. Carter figured it was just rural superstition. Stories to keep nosy kids out. He'd heard a few of them, whispers about old spirits and something called the whistlers. Just whine through the branches. He chuckled to a shop clerk who warned him before he left. The man hadn't laughed back. He just said, "Wind don't sound like it's comin' from right behind you." Carter made camp just past the ravine where the tree cover thickens. He set up motion-triggered trail cams, marked some deer scat, and turned in for the night. That's when he heard it. A whistle. Short. Repeating. A 2-note tune. Wee-hoo. First he thought it was a bird. But then he realized it had too much human tone, like lips shaping the notes. He stood still. Came again. Wee-hoo. Closer. Then again from behind him. Carter spun around with his flashlight, expecting to see a prankster or maybe another surveyor. No one. The woods fell silent. He tried to laugh it off, but he ended up sleeping with a flare gun under his arm. The next morning, he hiked back to check the trail cams. Something was off. The first camera had been ripped clean off the tree. Not clawed, not bitten. Just torn away. The second showed nothing for hours, until about 3 a.m. when the feed caught something moving. Not an animal. It was a shape, pale, humanoid but distorted. Elongated. Thin arms. Eyes like glass caught in the lens. And worse, it was just standing there, watching. Then, it cocked its head and slowly raised its hand to its mouth, and whistled, right into the camera. Wee-hoo. Carter fell backward off the log when he saw it. Later, he found a set of tracks leading away from the camera. Barefoot. Human-like. But too long. Too deep. He radioed back to base but got only static. Carter debated whether to pack up and leave, but his pride kept him there. He figured he'd log the incident and finish the job. That afternoon, he found something that wasn't on any map. A shack. Old, broken, the roof half caved in. It looked like no one had touched it in decades. But inside it was weirdly clean. Bones arranged in little piles in the corners. A circle of charred stones in the center, like someone had tried to burn something but failed. And carved into the wood on every wall. "Don't whistle back." He stayed long enough to snap some photos, then got the hell out of there. He tried not to think about it, but that night the whistling returned. This time it was all around him, echoing, surrounding, different pitches, high and low, like a chorus. He covered his ears. It didn't help. And then a voice, a dry, breathy whisper. "You heard us." Carter didn't sleep. By sunrise, he had everything packed and was halfway down the ridge before he heard it again. Just once, far off in the trees. Wee-hoo. He didn't turn around. Later, back at the ranger station, he handed over his report minus the weird details. But when he mentioned Laurel Branch Hollow, the supervisor's face dropped. "You went in there?" he asked. Carter nodded. "Why?" The man took a long breath and said, "We lost 2 surveyors in '87. One came back. He wouldn't talk. Just sat in a corner and hummed a tune over and over. Then he whistled. The same 2-note sound. Carter left that night and never returned to the Appalachians. It started in the fall of 2004. Daniel was 17, Kayla 14. Their grandpa had just passed away. A tough, off-the-grid kind of man who built the house they still lived in, way back up a dirt trail with no name. They buried him in the family plot, which sat on a bluff just past the edge of their property. The plot was old stones dating back to the 1800s, some carved by hand. No fence, just an old gate that leaned on one hinge. The night after the funeral, Daniel woke up to the sound of gravel shifting, footsteps on the path outside. He looked out the window and saw what he thought was a person standing at the tree line. But something wasn't right. The figure didn't move, didn't sway, just stood there. Then, 2 points of light blinked on, red, like coals. Daniel blinked, rubbed his eyes, and the lights were gone. He didn't sleep again that night. Kayla started having nightmares. She said she dreamed of someone calling her name from the woods. A voice like their grandpa's, but stretched slower, too deep. And every time she tried to go outside in the dream, she'd see something standing under the old ash tree near the creek. The skin looked like bark. Its arms were too long. Its eyes always red. She said it didn't move like it had joints. It moved like it remembered how people were supposed to move but didn't quite get it right. One night, Kayla actually did get out of bed. Sleepwalking, Daniel found her halfway to the cemetery, barefoot in the frost, whispering, "He's not really dead." They locked the doors after that. The Maddox house had a root cellar dug into the hillside, stone walls, damp and dark. They only used it for storing jars and tools. One night they heard banging down there, like something hitting the stone wall hard. Their mom thought it was a raccoon. Daniel and Kayla knew better. When they opened the trapdoor, the smell hit them first. Rot, iron, mold. The light flickered, and something had clawed the inside of the door. Long scratches, 5 in a row, deep. Then they heard it again. From the back wall. A breath. Slow. Bit. Like lungs full of water. And just beneath it, barely audible, "Kayla." They told their mom, who didn't believe them. Said it was nerves. Stress. But she wouldn't go near the cellar either. So Daniel told someone else. At the local feed store, there was an old man named Mr. Lunsford who'd known their grandpa. When Daniel mentioned the red eyes and the cemetery, Lunsford's face went pale. "You saw it too?" he asked. He told Daniel about a local story, not quite a legend, more like a warning passed through families that had lived there long enough. They called it the red-eyed thing, or just it. It lived in the deep parts of the woods. Only came out when someone important died. It liked grief. It fed on sorrow and memory. And it could wear the faces of the dead. But it always had them eyes, Lunsford said. Can't hide those, like hot cinders in a dark barn. Then he looked Daniel in the eye and said, "You tell your sister not to talk to it, not even if it sounds like your grandpa. And whatever you do, don't follow it." They tried to move on. But the thing didn't. It got bolder. It scratched at the windows at night. It mimicked voices. One time it sounded exactly like their mother, begging Kayla to come outside. They caught Kayla again, sleepwalking, standing in the cemetery barefoot, looking down at a hole that hadn't been there before.
A fresztlidag grave.
When Daniel pulled her back, she screamed like he was killing her. The grave, gone by morning. Then, on a cold November night, it got in. Daniel heard the screen door creak, thought it was wind. Then he heard the latch to Kayla's door open. He ran into the hallway and saw it. Tall, pale, skin stretched too tight, bent at the wrong angles. But its face, it was his grandfather's, only off, like someone trying to remember a face they'd only seen in a picture. The eyes were wrong, glowing. And when it opened its mouth, Daniel said it looked like there were too many teeth, like rows of sewing needles. It whispered, "She belongs with us." Daniel screamed. The thing snapped toward him like a puppet on a string. But then, gunshot. Their mom, standing at the stairs, shotgun in hand. It didn't fall. It just stepped backward into the dark, vanishing like smoke in water. They moved out within a week. Burned the old house to the ground. Let the cemetery overgrow. Kayla never fully recovered. She still sleepwalks. Sometimes she draws pictures, always of a figure standing in the woods, red eyes burning, waiting. Daniel said he never saw it again. But last year he visited the old store. Mr. Lunsford was gone. The clerk who replaced him asked Daniel his name. When he told him, the man frowned. You're Maddox's boy? Daniel nodded. The clerk looked uneasy. Then he said, You should know. Someone's been asking about you. Tall fella. Pale. Real strange voice. Asked if you were still living nearby. Said he used to know your grandfather. Travis wasn't new to mining. He'd been doing contract work for years, mostly for insurance companies who needed certified assessments on old structures before developers could touch them. Number 7 was supposed to be routine. Get in, get readings, get out. The shaft had been sealed with concrete and steel plating, but the state wanted it reopened temporarily to test for stability in case it could be repurposed as a waste storage site. It was Travis, 2 ground engineers, Rob and Kevin, and a safety guy named Dom who'd done some military cave rescue back in the day. Right away, Dom didn't like the job. Said it felt off. Too quiet even for mountain country. But the pay was good. So they cut the seal, dropped a few feet down into the shaft, and began the descent. Number 7 went down almost 700 feet before leveling out. The walls were narrow, damp, but structurally, surprisingly intact. Rusted beams held firm, the old rail lines still embedded in the rock. But within 30 minutes, something felt strange. There was a humming low like machinery, but inconsistent. Rob joked it was just water in the walls. Kevin didn't laugh. The further in they went, the more their lights seemed to struggle. Dom said it was like the dark was thicker than normal. You couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Shadows felt heavy. And then Travis saw it. A boot print. Fresh. Not theirs. Wrong tread pattern. Too small. Then another. And another. Leading down a tunnel none of them had mapped yet. No records showed any tunnels branching where they now stood. But this one did. It dipped downward, a slow curve too smooth to be natural. Kevin scanned for gas. Nothing.
Dom hesitated.
Then they heard it. A voice. Faint. Echoing. Sounded like it was calling out, Help! Dom shouted back, voice bouncing off the stone. Nothing replied. But the voice had sounded too clean. Not muffled like it should have been underground. Against better judgment, they followed the tunnel. For nearly 20 minutes, it spiraled deeper. Their radios cut out. The air grew cold. So cold their breath turned to fog. Then they saw it. A light, flickering, like a lantern, hanging from a nail in a tunnel that, as far as any record showed, didn't exist. The ground suddenly shifted. A deep vibration, like a tremor. Kevin turned back, said he wasn't going further. Then, the light vanished. They spun around, weapons drawn. Dom had a sidearm, and saw nothing. Then, the tunnel behind them, where they'd come from, collapsed. Not naturally. It was like something had closed it. Deliberately, quietly. Dom checked his GPS tag. Static.
Kompas spuniuse Leslie.
They were trapped. That's when they heard it again. The voice. Closer. This time it whispered, You came back. Travis swore it sounded like his dad. But his dad had died in 2009. Kevin said, That's not funny. But no one had spoken. They tried backtracking, but the paths didn't match. Tunnels split, looped, dead-ended where they shouldn't. It was like the mine was shifting. Then Rob screamed. His light had caught something. A face. Just for a second. Pale.
Vet.
Blank. They spun their lights. Nothing there. Then the rocks started whispering. Not metaphorically, actually whispering. Like the stone had mouths. Dozens of them. They said names. Kevin's. Rob's. Travis's. Then, deeper. They found another path and followed it. Desperate. Eventually, they entered a chamber unlike anything they'd seen. Man-made but ancient, older than the mine. Carvings in the walls, symbols no one recognized. And in the center, a hole. Not a shaft. Pit. So black, their lights couldn't pierce it. And from it, a sound. Like breathing. Slow.
Vet.
Enormous. Then Dom stepped too close. The ground cracked and he fell but never hit bottom. Just vanished.
No scream. No tud.
Gone. Rob panicked and tried to run. The shadows swallowed him. Travis and Kevin were alone. They turned and ran, no plan, no map. They followed instinct, not logic. Every turn, they heard footsteps behind them. Every pause brought whispers. But finally, somehow, they found the main shaft again. The lift cage, the ladder. They climbed like their lives depended on it, because they did. When they reached the top, Travis sealed the entrance behind them. Kevin had a breakdown, quit mining, moved to Arizona, never went near a hill again. Dom and Rob were never found. No records were changed. The official story stayed. Assessment incomplete. Collapse risk too high. But Travis knew better. Eric was 34 when the letter came. His grandfather, Silas Rowley, had passed. The will left Eric a cabin and 2 acres of forest in a part of the Appalachians few people even hiked, let alone lived in. He'd only met Silas once. A grim man with thin eyes and a tighter mouth. The kind of person who measured every word before it left his throat. Eric had always thought the stories about Appalachian weirdness were a stereotype. He was from Durham. He didn't believe in haunted houses or backwoods spirits. He believed in history and secrets. That's why, when he saw the cabin, when he felt the heavy hush that sat over the trees, he didn't run. He got curious. And that was the first mistake. The cabin was old but solid. Stone chimney, timber walls, and a warped front porch that leaned toward the trees like it wanted to fall. Inside, everything had a layer of dust, a rusted lantern, a wood stove, and in the drawer of a desk, a journal, Silas's, only it wasn't written like a diary. It read more like warnings. Short entries, frantic tone, scribbled margins. They said never to dig. Feeds on old things. Heard scratching again last night. Under the bed. Tried salt. Didn't work. The earth is deeper than salt. I think it remembers the blood. Eric thought maybe it was dementia. Or a story. Silas had been alone for decades. But the last entry made him stop cold. If you're reading this, it means I failed. I'm sorry, boy. Whatever you do, do not touch the floor. That night, Eric couldn't sleep. The cabin was too quiet. The kind of quiet that has shape to it, like something holding its breath. Then he heard it. A scratch. Faint. Repetitive. Underneath him. He got up. Looked under the bed. Nothing. Then he heard it again. From beneath the floorboards. Eric checked for animals. No signs.
No droppings. No oles.
But there was something strange. A small metal loop in the center of the floor, half hidden under a rug. He pulled it. Beneath was a square hatch nailed shut with iron spikes. The wood around it had symbols carved into it. Rough, angry, like they'd been done with a nail or broken glass. He didn't open it. Not yet. The next morning, he found someone on the property. An old man, thin, wearing boots caked with red clay. He stood at the tree line and didn't come closer. When Eric called out, the man just said, "You still got it locked?" Eric nodded, unsure why. "Good. Keep it that way. Do you know what's under there?" Eric asked. The man didn't blink. Just said, "A hunger and a memory. Neither forgives." Then he turned and vanished into the trees like smoke in a draft. Over the next few days, the noises got worse. Scraping, whispering. Sometimes it sounded like someone crying, a woman, maybe, or a child. Sometimes it sounded like someone laughing, but with no joy behind it. And then came the dreams. Eric saw his grandfather, kneeling on the floor, nails in his hands, crying. "It got out once," he'd whisper. "I put it back, but it learned me. It knows how to wait." Eric couldn't take it anymore. He wanted answers. He pried the hatch open. Inside, a narrow stone stairwell. Impossible, the cabin sat on shallow bedrock. But the steps went down. Far down. He lit a lantern. And descended. The stairs spiraled tight like a well. Moss and soot coated the walls. The air smelled like old blood and wet leaves. At the bottom he found a room. Round. Stone. And in the center a pit. Bricked around. Covered with a rusted grate. He approached. Looked down. Nothing. Blackness. But then something moved. A shape. Pale. Long-limbed. Crawling up the wall like it had too many joints. red eyes that blinked sideways. Eric froze. His lantern flickered. Then, a voice. Blood remembers blood. He ran. Behind him, the grate cracked. The pit hissed. Eric sealed the hatch. Nailed it shut. Salted the boards. Read every entry in the journal. Desperate for a solution. The old man returned one last time. If it sees you, it knows you, he said. Now it's yours. What do I do? Eric begged. The man paused, then whispered. The same thing your grandfather did. That night, Eric lit a fire in the hearth, fed it dry wood, poured kerosene under the floorboards. Then he struck the match. The cabin burned fast. He waited outside until the roof collapsed, until the screams, those inhuman screams, went silent. But even as the embers glowed, he heard it, from beneath the ash. You can't bury memory. The town of Elora doesn't show up on modern maps. It's mostly forest now. But once, it had a mine, a few homes, and a whitewashed church that sat on the ridge like a lonely eye. St. Elora's Church. It was boarded up long before Irene was born. Her grandfather said the steeple had been struck by lightning in '36 during a storm no one remembered. But the church didn't burn. It just shut down. People stopped going. The pastor vanished. Irene's parents never talked about it, called it God's will and left it there. But kids love secrets. And Irene, her brother Sam, and their friend Margot made it their mission to break in one summer. They weren't prepared for what they found. The church was locked up tight. Not just boards and nails. Symbols were carved into the wood, layered in soot. The front steps were half buried under vines no one remembered planting. Sam brought bolt cutters. Margot brought a flashlight. Irene brought a tape recorder. They got in through the cellar. The air hit them like a mouth, warm, wet, and stale. Inside, the pews were covered in sheets. The altar was untouched. Dust coated everything, except the bell rope. That was pristine, white, like someone had just woven it. Then they noticed the hymn books. Every single one had been burned from the inside out. No fire damage on the covers. Just hollowed pages. And in the pulpit, under a cracked Bible, they found a letter. Yellowed, shaking in her hands. Irene read, "They made me ring the bell, but it doesn't call to God. It opens something. It feeds it. I hear them at night. They whisper in tongues older than dirt. Forgive me. I buried the keys in the well. Do not ring the bell." There was a well behind the church, covered with stone. Margot stayed back, but Sam and Irene lifted the cap. Inside was blackness that didn't feel right. Pulsed, like it was breathing. They dropped a rock.
No esplas.
Just silence. Then a voice echoed up.
Sam.
Not a whisper, not a breath. A word, clear and exact. Sam jumped back. Irene hit record. Nothing played. They closed the well, or thought they did. But that night, the dreams started. Irene dreamed of the church every night for a week. But in the dream, it was alive. The bell rang endlessly. The pews were full of things wearing people's skin, but all facing the altar, where something too tall to be human stood under a black veil. Sam said he had dreams too, but in his, he was under the church, held down, and something was pulling at his teeth, one by one. Margot stopped coming over, said her eyes burned whenever she got near the woods. Then Sam started sleepwalking, always toward the ridge. The night it happened, Irene woke up to a sound she'd never heard in real life, but knew instantly. The bell. St. Elora's bell. Loud, heavy, ringing once, then again. She ran outside. The air was wrong. Still, the stars felt too close, and Sam was gone. She raced to the ridge, found the church door wide open, the rope swinging. Inside, the altar was glowing faintly. Sam stood there, barefoot, eyes wide, whispering. I had to let it out. Then, a shadow poured out of the pulpit. Not a person, not an animal. A shape like smoke made of bone. It lunged. Irene blacked out. When she woke up, Sam was gone. The town searched for days. Found nothing. The church was resealed. The well bricked over. No one spoke of it again. But a month later, Irene saw a man in a black coat walking the old road. He looked wrong, like something pretending to age. He wore a white collar, and he smiled with too many teeth. "Your brother called well," he said. So we answered. Then he walked into the woods. She never saw him again. Irene never stopped looking for Sam. But when she returned to the site as an adult, the church was gone. No foundation.
No grabes.
Just trees and silence. But some nights, when the wind moves right, she hears a bell. One ring, then another. The tape recorder from that day. She still has it. Never plays anything. Except once it clicked on by itself. And played one thing. A voice.
Familiar.
Afraid. I let it out, Irene. I didn't mean to. I didn't know it could remember.